We're okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending our special planning meeting tonight. It's on development, Danforth 60 Holding Subdivision. I'll call the meeting to order at 7:08 p.m. And the first item is the territorial land acknowledgement. Before our meeting gets underway, I would like to formally recognize the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Alma-Calderman is located on the Mississauga Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. The Township of Alma-Calderman respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nation are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none. Item 4, approval of the agenda. Be it resolved that the agenda for the special council session of Tuesday, September 13th, 2022 be approved as circulated. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Phillips, second. Councillor Hogg, all in favor? Carried. Now, before we go on with the planning report, I'd like to introduce Ashley Yearwood. Ashley has just joined Northumberland County in the planning department. He works with Dwight Campbell in planning. And as part of the Economic Development Planning and Tourism Committee, I have the opportunity to work with Ashley, and just wanted to introduce you, Ashley. You're welcome. Item 5 is the planning report, and I'm going to turn it over to our planner, Jennifer Current.
Good evening, through you, Mayor Latchford. This is a public meeting for a application for draft plan approval for an 11-lot subdivision in the Township of Alnwick-Haldeman. The application was submitted to Northumberland County and the Township of Alnwick-Haldeman. Northumberland County, as the upper tier municipality, is the approval agency for subdivisions in our municipality. The application is for an 11-lot residential subdivision on 5.67 hectares of land in the Grafton settlement area. So the property is located in the defined settlement area of Grafton. It's a residential subdivision. Generally, in our rural areas, subdivisions aren't permitted, but in our settlement areas that are designated in both the county official plan and the township official plan, residential subdivisions are permitted. This is an application for draft plan approval, which means that it sets out the principle for development of the property. It's an 11-lot subdivision, residential lots. They average about 0.4 hectares. There's one lot that is smaller. The subdivision does not contain a proposed or a park in this small subdivision. Given the size of the subdivision, that's not unusual. There's one internal road that at this point in time terminates in a cul-de-sac, but does allow for a road connection to an adjacent property to the east, for which both the county and the township have had considerable pre-consultation on a subdivision application. So this would allow for a future connection to the lands to the east, which is important for community building. The lots would be serviced by municipal water and individual private septic services. In the submission for draft plan approval, there were several technical documents that were included in the submission. There was a planning justification report, a hydrological and geotechnical report, a stormwater report, a stage 1 and 2 archaeological report, traffic brief. I know if I don't look at my list, I'm going to forget 1 or 2 of the studies that were provided, and all of those, an environmental impact study, and a functional servicing study. And those studies were, the need for those studies were determined during a pre-consultation meeting with the developer and the developer's consultant. I forgot to mention that the developer and the developer's consultant are here tonight. And I'm sure if anybody has any questions regarding the subdivision, they would be happy to answer them once I finish my presentation. It's Bob Clark right there. And I believe it is, the developer is Adrian Pepper. Is that correct? Okay. So there were a number of technical studies that were submitted with the application for draft plan approval. We'll just go back to the beginning. The process for the review of a subdivision application is that the application for draft plan approval is submitted to the county and then circulated to the township and a number of other agencies, which include Lower Trent Conservation, Ontario Hydro, Bell Canada, the school boards, Ontario Power Generation, Union Gas, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Canada Post, Rogers, Lakefront Utilities, everybody. Everybody gets an opportunity to review the application, provide comments to the municipality. Some of the agencies, to the county, some of the agencies provide comments, some of the agencies don't provide comments throughout the process. So this, as I mentioned, this property is located in the settlement area of Grafton. It's sort of in the, I would call it the southeast quadrant of the hamlet of Grafton. It has frontage on Old Danforth Road. And there is a single detached dwelling on the property at this point in time. St. Mary's Catholic Elementary School is located to the north of the property, and Grafton Public School is located to the west of the property, about 500 meters. So with the planning approval process, an application for draft plan approval, if approved, it sets out the general lot fabric and the servicing for a development, but with draft plan approval come a number of conditions that have to be finalized or fulfilled before final development can take place. So the detailed design regarding the road, engineering, the exact dimensions of the stormwater management pond, all of that stuff is undertaken at detailed design. The draft plan approval process is to set out the principles of development and establish the general framework for it. And that it says, and the studies that were submitted with this application generally say that yes, a development can take place here. It can be serviced. Stormwater can be managed on site. It won't have an impact on adjacent properties. The traffic infrastructure in the area is sufficient to accommodate the increase in traffic. And that sort of thing. That's what's looked at this point in time. Then after draft plan if draft plan approval is granted, that's where they get down to the nuts and bolts of things, and we see detailed engineering drawings. So the studies that are submitted that are available at the municipality, if anybody wants to have a look at them, or I can email them to you, are general in nature, and they don't get down to specific road design. It says, yes, this is where the road's going to go, but it doesn't say how many millimeters of base and that sort of thing at this point in time. So the studies that were submitted with the application, the first one was a stormwater management report. And basically what the stormwater management report concluded was that stormwater can be accommodated on site at using LID. Low impact development, that's use of vegetated grass swales for quality, and then a dry pond for quantity control. That's what they're proposing at this point in time with this development. So there is a stormwater management pond that is proposed for the southwest corner. There's an irregularly shaped piece of property. There's copies of the draft plan up there if anybody wants to have a copy of the draft plan. There's an irregularly shaped parcel, and that is the location of the proposed stormwater management facility. So the Stormwater management report, which was prepared by Jewel Engineering, concluded that stormwater could be dealt with on site without any negative impact on adjacent landowners, because the principles of development are that a development site has to accommodate any increase in stormwater on the site. It can't impact adjacent landowners, so it can't run onto somebody else's property and impact them. There was an environmental impact study that was prepared by GHD, and it will be reviewed by Lower Trent Region or Lower Trent Conservation. And the report concluded that construction within the development area will result in no serious negative impacts on the functions of identified natural features. I believe that there were some preliminary comments from Lower Trent Conservation requesting some additional information on the parameters of the study and the conclusions. And as the review process goes through, the developer's consultant will work with Lower Trent to address those issues. A stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment was prepared by Northeastern Archaeological Associates. Because the stage 1 report concluded that a stage 2 was necessary. It is almost inevitably necessary whenever they do a stage 1. I don't think I've seen a stage 1 without a stage 2 in a long time. They did a stage 2, and during the stage 2 work, they did a number of tests. They undertook a number of test pits, which revealed some artifacts. Most of the artifacts were dated to the 20th century materials, and I believe it says 4% of the stage 2 artifacts were dated to the 19th century. So through consultation with the Ministry of Culture, Tourism and Sport, which is the provincial agency that deals with archaeological reports, they concluded that a stage 3 study was not required. A hydrogeological and geotechnical study was undertaken, and the purpose of that study is to determine, the geotech part is to look at the ability of the soils for road construction and building construction, and the hydrogeological component, it looks at the suitability of the soils for, in this case, individual private septic systems. And it was concluded, GHD concluded that it is their opinion that there will be no significant constraints from groundwater that couldn't be dealt with for both road construction and Class 4 sewage disposal systems. A functional servicing report was also prepared for the development, and that looks at, because this development is in Grafton, which has a municipal water supply, it looked at the ability of the Grafton water supply to accommodate the proposed development. It concluded that there is sufficient capacity in the distribution system for the proposed development. The water main would go along the new road, and eventually when the development to the east is developed, it would allow for future connection to that, because a looped water system is always a better water system. It provides better water pressure. So when you can loop it, it's always better. So it will allow for that future connection to that development to the east. The functional servicing report didn't address water capacity with the municipal water system, and the application has been submitted to or circulated to Lakefront Utilities, which manages the Grafton water supply system. So that's one of the things that's going to have to be confirmed prior to draft plan approval, is that there is sufficient capacity. It's my understanding that there is, but that will have to be confirmed before final approval. Sorry, not final approval, draft plan approval. A traffic brief was prepared by Jewel Engineering. A full traffic study wasn't requested with this application, given the size of the proposed development. And the brief concluded that the minimal increase in traffic, which is basically 11 trips during the peak hours, would have no significant impacts on the functionality of the existing road network. It did not, they said that the sight lines at the proposed entrance of the new road are sufficient. Now, I have received, since this application was circulated, I have received a number of phone calls and a couple of emails. And in my report, I tried to summarize what those questions and concerns were. There was one concern regarding whether or not the hydro network is capable of accommodating the increased demand generated by this development. Well, the application is circulated to Hydro One, and I believe they have provided preliminary comments. Ashley can correct me if I'm wrong on this. They provided preliminary comments that they didn't have any concerns with the proposed development and the ability of the network to accommodate it. There were some questions, some general questions were asked regarding the stormwater management facility and how far it would be from the property line and who would be responsible for maintaining it. At the end of the day, when the development is fully developed and all the facilities have been assumed by the municipality, it will ultimately be the municipality that is responsible for maintaining the stormwater management pond. That being said, in a subdivision agreement, when there are facilities like municipal roads and stormwater management facilities, the subdivision agreement contains provisions that require the developer to construct the infrastructure, maintain the infrastructure for a number of years, after which it's assumed by the municipality. And before it's assumed by the municipality, it is inspected by the municipality's engineers to make sure that everything is in working order. But once assumed by the municipality, it will be the township's responsibility to maintain it. This site has some topographical challenges. There's a steep slope on the northern portion of the property. There were concerns regarding drainage and building envelopes. Again, this development will be the design will be peer reviewed by engineers retained by the municipality to ensure that there are suitable building envelopes on all of the lots that can have access that is safe and will be able to be accessed by emergency vehicles. That was one of the concerns that was expressed. And drainage has to be dealt with on site. The stormwater design cannot allow for water to flow onto adjacent properties that abut the property. Usually they use perimeter swales and that sort of thing that prevent water. But again, that is part of the detailed design that takes place after final approval. Privacy. There were some concerns expressed regarding the new internal road and a house that is adjacent to that internal road, and a loss of privacy because they're now going to have a road coming in next to them where previously they didn't. And there was a separate concern was raised by another landowner with whose rear yard abuts lot 11 in the plan of subdivision, and a request for a privacy fence has been received by the municipality. There were traffic concerns were raised by a couple of different people, and this has to do with the intersection of Old Danforth Road and Station Road. So it's not at the location of the new proposed road, but it's further to the north. There's the intersection, there's a 45-degree angle, and there are some concerns with respect to sight lines and a blind spot at that area. I received a lengthy email about concerns and the possibility of brushing and that sort of thing taking place. This has been raised to our Public Works Department, who is also reviewing the application, and the township's peer reviewer will also be looking at the road infrastructure in this area to make sure that if anything needs to be done, that it can be addressed. So this public meeting provides you, the public, an opportunity to express your concerns, ask any questions from the developer, from me, from Ashley, regarding the development. And those concerns and questions, we will try to address them, if not tonight, then in subsequent correspondence or telephone calls. And ultimately, once the application has been reviewed by all of the review agencies and including all the township departments and a peer reviewer for the township with respect to the engineering, I should have mentioned Northumberland County retains a hydrogeologist to review the hydrogeology and geotechnical reports. So those will all be peer reviewed by professionals to ensure that the principles and the conclusions in them are sound. Once that is done, all of those comments will be summarized. Council will be asked to make whether they support the development, and if they support the development, they will provide a resolution to the county, and then it's ultimately county council who makes a decision on draft plan approval. Draft plan approvals are generally granted for a 3-year time period. And if the conditions of draft plan approval aren't approved within that, or aren't finalized within that 3-year period, they expire. However, there is an opportunity for an extension to the draft plan approval. So I guess right now I'm done talking, and I can ask Bob if he would like to say something, and Ashley if he would like to say something.
Yep, that's fine, Bob.
Well, that's a very thorough review. Stand up and do this. Okay,
You can sit first,
I can have a seat. Oh, thank you.
closer to the mic.
Get comfortable. I really don't have that much to offer because Jennifer has done a very thorough job of reviewing this. We did meet with our study team, our project team, and they indicated that they were aware of the Lower Trent Conservation comments, and they are working to respond to those comments. The comments for the environmental constraints report, or the environmental consultants, they've agreed to do the additional information that's required. It does not involve that much extensive work, and they do not expect that it will result in any changes in their recommendations. Excuse me. The engineers indicated that the stormwater facility has been designed and based on the rainfall information that they prefer to use. I won't get into too much detail here, but there was a discussion in the Conservation Authority comments about whether or not you use Ministry of Transportation rainfall information, which apparently is general for Ontario and tends to be somewhat more rainfall, or whether you use local rainfall information. The consultants prefer to use local rainfall information, but they did assure us that the difference between the two is not that dramatic. And even if it was the larger rainfall, the system would be adequate to accommodate that. There was a question about topography, and yes, this is an interesting site because it does have some interesting topography, but the design, and we've been assured that the design has been conducted in such a way that the road itself does not experience any of those changes in topography, and all of the lots have been reviewed to ensure that there is a building envelope on all of the lots. We have reviewed the privacy fence, and we are willing to consider the possibility of a privacy fence. Made that final decision yet, but that is something. So those are the comments that I have with respect to the information that we have, and I look forward to any other comments or questions that may come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Is your preference to have Ashley or questions? Ashley first, maybe? Yes, okay, we'll let Ashley speak, and then if anybody from the public has questions, you can direct your questions to Jennifer or Ashley or Bob.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Latchford, and good afternoon, everyone. Okay, make sure we're good. Good, we're good to go.
Yep.
So as Jennifer mentioned, she pretty much put everything out on the table, and I don't even know what else to say, really. The only thing I could probably reiterate some points is that according to the Northumberland County official plan, it is this area is designated for rural settlement areas. So just echoing what Jennifer has stated, which this is where development would be permitted or would be considered permissible. The only other thing I could really think of is that in terms of some other comments we've received, as Jennifer mentioned, we've received comments from Laura Trent. We've also received comments from, I believe, Bell Canada, Canada Post, and also the Quarter Pine Ridge District School Board. And they didn't have any sort of concerns with the proposed development to date. So that's, I think, pretty much about all from a county level, because Jennifer just nailed everything out. So thank you so much. If there's any questions to everyone, I am here and will be more than happy to answer them if I can.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Ashley. So we'll open it up to the floor. Okay. I'll open it up for questions. If we can get an indication of how many have questions. Grit? John, Steve? I don't have your name. Andrea? Okay. Just in the order given then. Steve, John, Andrea. With questions? And that's Andy. And Glenn? Okay, we'll go. And how many questions are they allowed? Just two? Yeah, two for timing. So start with you, Grit, your first question.
Okay. I can do that too. Raise the table. Don't worry, my office chair does the same thing. Okay, Grit Cole, and I do have two questions. First one's fairly simple. The steep lots have maintenance issues because we see it even across the road from where we live. So what is the current slopes vegetation like now? Is it treed or is it, field that's going to have to be sort of maintained? Because I have visions of rolling tractors with people on them.
That's for you, Jennifer.
I believe the northern portion of the property, it's not heavily vegetated. It's just grassed at this point in time. It probably, I didn't walk up to the northern portion of it, but I imagine it's just kind of pasture. I believe the whole property was formerly pasture land. So it was probably just tall grass.
Right, okay. The real question, in an effort to do our part in our rural township to intensify where we can, and given that the province has allowed for additional secondary units, has consideration been given to considering semi-detached home on the 1 acre lots sharing a septic system? And is this a possibility? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Latchford. The zone provisions for the township permit on lands that are zoned Hamlet residential, permit a single detached dwelling on a parcel of land with, I believe it's 0.4 or is it 0.3? I can't remember. I think it's 0.4 hectares. Sorry, I don't have my zoning bylaw in front of me. And it does contain a higher lot area requirement for a semi-detached dwelling. So the application that we have before us is a application for single detached dwellings on 0.4 hectare properties. One thing that I have heard that some other municipalities that are doing is in terms of not necessarily it is a form of intensification, but it's also more has to do with affordable housing, is requiring a certain percentage of homes within a new development to be designed for secondary dwelling units to be used for rental accommodation or for families. I know that there are some municipalities that are doing that. Say 10% of the units within a development are required to have a secondary dwelling unit. That is something that council could consider. I don't believe we have had a discussion here at this municipality with respect to that. Given the lack of services in our municipality, we don't have sewer and water. Opportunities for higher density development are limited. And that is during our discussions that I've had through the affordable housing department at Northumberland County was we discussed the fact that affordable housing could be addressed in our municipality through the provision of secondary dwelling units. So that is something that we could be looking at with this and future developments.
Thank you. Next, Steve Gilchrist.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the opportunity to have a couple of questions. And actually, Ms. Curran, you just stole one of them because it's a more broader philosophical discussion about why, in fact, we aren't including some provision in all prospective developments to deal with affordability. And certainly something that if it can be considered in the context of this development, there's no time like the present. And I guess the other quick observation before my question, you made a wonderful presentation, but absent in that, although I appreciate Grit's question, we never hear about the vegetation. And as a municipality with, if you'll forgive me, a pretty ineffectual ability to protect forests, it begs the question why that isn't more of a consideration when we're talking about developments. And it bears on the fact that you talked about a privacy fence being a concern raised. How ironic is it when we have properties that already have adequate tree cover that we allow being cleared, and all of a sudden you have privacy issues as a result of that. And if we left well enough alone, we wouldn't have the issue in the first place. My question, if I will, you talked about how a number of the provisions in this application are being peer reviewed. My concern, and I would be most grateful if a fulsome accounting can be provided as part of the feedback after all the questions tonight, not tonight, but when you get a chance. I certainly understand we need to be part of the ongoing growth of the county. It would be irresponsible to not accept that we have a role to play. But I can't think of another business that we subsidize when we attract them to the riding. And so I would be grateful for as detailed a financial undertaking as you can provide, and what the difference is between what we will collect from development charges and what the actual cost will be of putting in the infrastructure, and what it will cost for the peer reviews. Not just our own, but our taxes go to the county as well. And where is the overall financial accountability all bundled together, not just the pure costs out there for asphalt and sidewalks, if any, and streetlights, but also the personnel costs. And so we can have a clear understanding of the extent to which this or any other development is in fact being subsidized, if it is. And if it's not, then it's on a level playing field with every other business that we've attracted to the township or the county. I guess I will leave it at that because I think it bundles together the question of peer review and development charges and the ability to satisfy ourselves that the applicant is going to be covering all of the appropriate and applicable costs.
Let Bob answer, or do you want to
I can
answer that?
I can answer.
Bob?
I'll answer.
Okay.
I'll just provide you with one, well, it'll probably be more than one general comment, but the peer review costs are covered by a deposit that the developer submits when they submit the application. If the peer review costs exceed the amount of the developer's deposit, they're required to provide the municipality with those additional funds. The infrastructure required by the development. That's road construction, any sidewalks that are needed, streetlights, stormwater management facilities, all of that sort of stuff that is internal and sometimes external. If external work is required as a part of the development, is negotiated as part of the subdivision agreement, and it is the developer's responsibility to pay those, to pay for those, pay for that infrastructure. And when the municipality negotiates a subdivision agreement, they also take a deposit, or do we call it, it's not a deposit, what's it called? The word's escaping, securities. We take securities such that if the developer fails to complete the works, the municipality has that money to use to finish any works that did not get done. So we're covered from a financial perspective with respect to the infrastructure that they're required to complete as part of the development. We're covered in terms of peer review because they have to pay for the costs of the peer reviews, because that's their responsibility, because they're reaping the benefit from it. And then the development charges that are paid are to offset the capital costs associated with growth, and that's calculated through the development charges study. So the development charges in our municipality for subdivision development, those development charges, I believe they're charged at the time of building permit issuance. So when the actual dwelling is a building permit is obtained for a structure, for a residential structure, that's when the development charge is taken, because it's to offset the growth related costs, and the growth related costs don't exist until the people are in the houses. So that's sort of a general framework about how the finances work with that. I guess I'm at a bit of a loss because I'm not sure how to calculate personnel costs associated with that.
I wouldn't dwell on that part, but my concern is, and it isn't unique to this, far from it, that things like the county costs don't get recognized the same way as the township's own costs are. And these are just sort of swept off the table, and yet they form part of the same taxes we pay.
Yes.
And I think it becomes a matter of bragging rights for the developer if they can, as you've just said, make sure that they have covered all of those costs, that they have come into this community on an equal footing with every other business that does that. And so I appreciate your answer. Be intrigued if you do get a chance to look at those details. And I know the devil's in the detail, but far too often we've seen municipalities fall well behind the 8 ball when it comes to the true total costs, not just municipal education.
Yeah.
And others, but
And
I know that's a whole different.
That's okay.
That's a whole different kind of fish.
I'll just let you know also that Northumberland County does have a development charge now.
Yes.
They do have a development charge, and the county did take a developer's deposit for the hydro G costs, right, Ashley? Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you again for the time, Your Worship.
You're welcome. John Logal, you're next, please.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council, for the opportunity to address you tonight. I live at 214 Old Danforth, which is just down the hill, about 100 yards away from the corner, or the 45-degree corner that Jennifer mentioned. That is a 45-degree corner, but the truth of the matter is, it is very well hidden by cedars that have grown almost to the edge of the road, certainly well past. There's a hydrant there. You can't, unless you know the hydrant's there, you can't see it. And the cedars have come out there. Many of the people here back in the back row walk that for their pleasure daily. There's children walking up there going to school each and every day. Most of them are at the age where their mother still takes them. But it is very dangerous, and I see that all the time. It becomes more dangerous in the winter when the parents drop the kids off at school and they park along there on this 45-degree angle 45-degree corner, and you can't see anything. And so Jennifer, you mentioned there's only 11 more cars at peak times, which is a concern because it's be worse than it currently is. But you're also saying that you're going to the possibility of a further development to the east, adding on to that road. So I don't know whether that becomes 11 or 30 or 50 cars more, but it's dangerous the way it is now. I did ask the public works manager to come out in the spring. He told me he's intending to do some brushing to open it up a little bit. And he also said, without real close look at it, but he thought it would need an engineering work to have something done. So is that the responsibility of the residents to pay for that, or is that part of the development cost? Is what I'm saying. I guess I'm asking that. So there's a lot there, Jennifer. If you can answer anything, I'd appreciate it.
All I can say with respect to the intersection and any possible redesign, it sounds like it's an existing condition that is an existing dangerous. I'm just paraphrasing what you've said. From what you've said, it's an existing dangerous intersection that needs attention. Because it's existing, I don't know that it is and again, I'll take advice from our peer reviewer and our manager of public works, and I'll give these comments to them. But if it's an existing situation that needs to be remedied, it may be the responsibility of the municipality. If it will be exacerbated by the proposed development, perhaps there's a contribution there from the developer. I don't know at this point in time.
That's all I have. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Andrea. I recognize you now.
Thank you very much for hearing us out tonight. I just had a few concerns, and my reasons, are twofold. I live right behind where the development will be going. As well, I'm a teacher at the school St. Mary's, which is also aligned with the property that we're speaking of. So I echo a lot of the concerns that have been mentioned tonight in both letters and this evening. And I do, especially with that corner, is always a concern, as much as we really try as a school to not have that street as a parking lot, the difference of 1 or 2 cars, it makes a huge difference. So I can't imagine 11 cars, or in future subdivisions, quite more than that. So I hear a lot tonight about, the damage so-called being minimal. And I'm just wondering, what is the purpose of the development? What are we as a community going to gain from having this development, especially when we're talking about such high maintenance long-term with sidewalks and things like that, as versus to our larger properties in town, which are pretty well zero maintenance on the county other than the road structure. Thank you.
Settlement areas in a municipality are the designated areas for people to live. We have land in our designated settlement area that is appropriate for development, and that the township's official plan and the county official plan states that in rural areas, rural settlement areas are the focus of development. So what do we get? We get places for people to live. In a designated settlement area where there are services, we have schools, we have churches, we have recreation centers, we've got 3 restaurants now. We've got a store or 2. It's a community. And it's building a community, and it's helping support a community. So that's what the municipality would see from this. Focused development in a settlement area is more economical for a municipality than scattered development throughout a municipality with a lot here and a lot there. If we have it focused in a settlement area, it's a more efficient use of our resources in terms of plowing streets and maintaining streets and that sort of thing. So that's what it helps build a vibrant community.
Thanks, Andrea. Andy? I think you're on mute. Do you have to let him in, Susan, or is he
Hi
in?
there. I think I'm in now.
Okay, you're in now. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for
ahead.
the opportunity to allow me to have a question. I'm actually one of Andrea's neighbors. I live a little further down the street. I did notice that the parcel of land does include approximately a 1 acre section of land to the north that connects directly to County Road 2. However, I don't see anything in the proposed development subdivision for what's going to happen to that parcel of land. My concern would be that it would be a construction entrance or some sort of additional access road that isn't on a drawing. I was wondering if anybody could shed any light on what's happening to that piece of the property, because it is all connected. There's signage there now by Fidelity for the proposed subdivision. They're advertising it already, and I've made calls into Fidelity about the subdivision to find out what I could, but nobody seems to have any answer. And my concern is I've got young kids. Again, no fences, again, steep slopes and hills. And if that's going to be a construction entrance or any other type of entrance that is going to increase congestion along County Road 2 through that very narrow part of town, I'd be very concerned about noise, safety, dust, and all of the rest that goes with it.
Through you, Mayor Latchford, this property doesn't have frontage on County Road 2. It's the adjacent property to the east that has frontage on County Road 2 that Fidelity is working on an application for draft plan approval of. This development here is an 11 lot subdivision that only has frontage on Old Danforth Road, and it
Perfect.
doesn't have County Road 2 frontage.
I guess my question then is that 1 acre parcel of land that is all part of that one group? I'm assuming that's not part of anything to do with the subdivision then?
Oh, excuse me, sorry. The parcel with the subdivision sign on it for Fidelity Homes?
Yep.
That part is part of the location of that sign is on the Fidelity Homes property that we assume the township and the county will be receiving an application for draft plan approval of. It's not part of this development. It will be part of what we anticipate to be a subsequent development application from a different developer.
Okay,
Thank you, Andy.
thanks.
Our next speaker, Lynn.
Hello. I've just got the thing that was mailed. I don't have any further information, so I'm just wondering where the proposed entranceway is. I suppose it's to the west, is it?
Through you, Mayor Latchford, I'm going to see if Bob or Ashley could more accurately describe the exact location of the entrance. Is it to the, oh, here I've got a site plan, or I've got an air photo. It appears that the road will be located to the north of the existing dwelling on the subject property.
All right. Okay, that sounds about right. Now, are there any sidewalks proposed?
At this point in time, it's just a general application. We haven't received our comments with respect to sidewalks, but that is something that I will say that I do look at in a subdivision in a settlement area is sidewalks. That will be a discussion item.
All right, because I mean, I've seen several fairly recent subdivisions and no sidewalks. So I'm just wondering if this is going to be something that's looked into in the future subdivisions.
That is something that I look at when I'm looking at an application in the settlement area. And I believe that the Glens of Antrim subdivision is to have a sidewalk constructed immediately adjacent to the paved surface. I believe that's what it has. It may not be,
Wow.
it may not be constructed yet, but I think it is supposed to be in that development.
Well, all I can say is hallelujah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Lynn. Carrie. Carrie. You're muted, Carrie.
Okay.
Okay, we can hear you.
Our property is adjacent to that northern slope that was mentioned earlier. And there was some recommendation of a fence going up along that slope. And I certainly hope that there's no fencing along there at any time, because the views from up here, up on top of that hill, are tremendous. And I'd hate to see those views obstructed by fencing or walls. And secondarily, I assume that there's a master plan for all this property, 60 acres, including the eastern part that has been mentioned. That's not part of this subject property at this time, but I hope there's a master plan that shows how this connects with the eastern part and how it all works together. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Latchford, when we had pre-consultation with both developers with respect to this subdivision and the subdivision to the east, both developers were informed. That's kind of a dramatic word, but it's not. They were told that the municipality would be looking for connection between the two subdivisions, and they have worked together such that there is a connecting link that would line up for between the two subdivisions. So it does allow for community building in essence, because the developments will be connected.
Anything further, Carrie?
I've heard it to Andy's question about an access to Highway 2. I'm assuming that in the eastern properties, there is some kind of a connection.
We have not yet received an application for draft plan approval for the property to the east, but I would anticipate that a County Road 2 connection will be included in that development when it is proposed.
Okay, that's why a master plan would be a great idea, to be able to see the whole area and how it works.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Anyone else who hasn't had anything yet? Chris? Chris Local?
Good evening, everybody. I've got two or three things on my concern list here. Number one, and again, you've mentioned it a little bit before, but the north part of the property, the hill is quite steep. I question, how you would be able to make that hillside useful as far as building goes and whatnot. I don't know if anybody, again, I don't know if anybody's actually been out to see the property or whatnot. But, and again, I'm on the north side adjacent to the property. Second thing, park and green space for the area. The way I see it now, kids, basically have to go to the schools in order to, play and hang out with their friends, and you know, we're kind of asking a lot for them to get over there safely and whatnot. So it might not be a bad idea to have that in consideration in the future. And lastly, as far as it kind of goes into my first point about the hill and whatnot. I see, in order to make that north slope usable, is it going to be, leveled down? Like, I think the slope now has got to be 50 degrees anyways. Elevation is about 70 feet from top to bottom, as far as I can tell. And I'm concerned, like I have a bored well right on top of the hill, and it's basically 15 feet from the property line between my house and the property line. So I'm just wondering, how that would be affected if there was development, if they had to, I'm not a water expert or whatever, but if the hill had to be, if the slope had to be changed, how that would work, how that would affect me. So
Go ahead.
Certainly. Through you, Mayor Latchford, I'll make a couple general comments, then I'll open it up to the developer. But in looking at the topography of these sites, what I anticipate likely happening is the building envelopes will be on the southern portion of those properties. So the slope, the grading on I doubt that there would be a significant increase or significant change in the grading on the northern portion of the property. Again, during detailed design and engineering, that's when the lot grading, the subdivision grading plans are developed. But in what I've seen in similar developments is that the building envelopes are focused on the sort of the plateau of the property, which is the southern portion. But I will raise these concerns to our peer reviewer to make sure that they're addressed during the peer review. And if the developer or the developer's consultant would like to address those questions. And with respect to parkland, given the size of this development, I think it's like 5.5 hectares. A 5% park is not a very large park right here in this development. So what I would be recommending is that the municipality take 5% of cash in lieu of the value of the land instead of actual parkland. And that money would be used towards park improvements. And that being said, the adjacent property to the east is much larger. And a 5% park there would be more.
Okay, we'll have Bob Clark address that one particular question. Mhm. Nice try, Bob.
I'm basically agreeing with Jennifer that the hill will not be modified. The building envelopes that are proposed are in the southern portion. So I'm agreeing there, and also agreeing with the contribution towards a park space for the community that will serve the entire community rather than a small park, which would be a liability, I think, for the municipality. And with respect to the impact on water supply, I think that's something that the hydrogeologist can comment on.
Okay,
Hopefully that was audible.
yes, thank you. Okay. You want to do next? Any questions from council right now, or I don't think, pardon? I'm just going to ask, I don't think any more from the public. Any questions from council? Sure. Councillor Philip first, then Councillor Booth.
I have one comment with regards to the query about the well. I'm sure it goes without saying, obviously, this is public water supply, so there shouldn't be any pressure on the existing well. And because the slope isn't impacted, I'm not sure how deep your well is, Chris, but it should be completely isolated from the impact of water supply. And if the septic systems are properly designed in the subdivision, there should be no leachate at all, which may be your question about the quality of your water source. The county is very careful with its design of septic systems. And so, you know, that I would guess that they would want to know if you had a clear system to begin with, and I would make sure that you test your water before it starts, and then you have a marker for after it's finished. And that would be my recommendation to you, because you never know how the strata might be impacted and how that water you know, moves through the aquifer. So but my sense and my experience in this area is that the county is very careful about the placement of septic systems, and the fact that the water source is not going to be impacted. It will not impact in terms of pressure and volume, won't be impacted on your property because we're getting an outside source. It's a public source of water. So I hope that helps you a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not so much concerned.
Yeah, well, it you know, the source is completely from some other, from the township. That water supply is to those 11 homes is part of the public water system. So it has no impact on your water source, or it shouldn't.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah,
sorry.
through you, your worship, to Jennifer. Jennifer, could you just give us a general idea of what the timeline is then? Because you're talking about a peer review and a draft plan for proposal, or a draft plan approval to council. Just so we all have an idea, what's the general timeline for this? Are we talking months, weeks? Where does it go from here?
Ashley?
And thank you very much, Jennifer, through you, Mayor Latchford, to Councillor Booth. And just to reiterate, we're just looking at the timing of this overall development, if I'm not mistaken. So pretty much we're probably looking at right now, I would say maybe roughly about a year. You know, I would say just in summary, because there's still the peer reviewers that still has to be reviewed. Then there's still draft plan approval, which as part of draft plan approval, that's where the township and like municipality and any other agencies, they'll have the developer have to fulfill conditions of that draft approval. Sometimes that could be like, say, maybe 30, 40, 50 different things that they have to do, which is like combined with the series of studies. What also can come out from that too is just sometimes there's some physical development. So you might see servicing going in, the roads, the street lights just up front before we actually issue final approval. So I would say, like, say if the developer's really working very quickly in an expeditious manner, it could be realistically between like a year, even up to 2 or so.
So that's a year when they start to build, you mean, or?
It'll be, oops, sorry.
Yeah.
So I would say it'll be before final approval. And then once final approval is granted, then that's when building permits can be applied for. And then for the building permit process, that could be, sorry, it could be at least a month to maybe 6 months, all depending on how many units come in. Sorry, I'm thinking for more of a larger development. But if there's like say 11 units and if they're all coming at the same time, that could be a couple of months if they have everything all in order in terms of applicable law.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Deputy Mayor Gibson.
Kind of a running joke with everybody in the council chambers, but there's one chair that keeps dropping. And as you notice, I've got that chair tonight. So I started out up here and I'm down here. So I'm just going to talk into the microphone like this. So, and I hear it's the CAO's fault that I've got this chair tonight. So, yeah. Appreciate everybody's attendance and comments. And I think you've got some really great comments. The one thing that sticks out and thing that I notice more as, you know, our population grows, we get more vehicular traffic is that issue with the road. And I think, you know, as a township, we have to pay particular attention to if Public Works cannot ensure that that roadway is safe with the work that they undertake, that it's, I guess I would implore the next council or, you know, through this process that we have a real solid, responsible look at how that roadway is constructed for the residents there. And I don't know if it's the responsibility of the developer, but if there's an opportunity at any point to make any pedestrian walkways through that, I think that would be an added feature to that development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Phillip,
Usually I don't say anything, right?
or you get on a roll.
I just want to piggyback on what the deputy mayor said, and that is, and to show you a precedent that gives an example, a positive example of that kind of thing going on. Council noticed that there was an issue at the public school with traffic congestion, kids moving between cars at the end of the school day and so on. And the township got together with the school board and solved that problem. So that kids could move safely, adults could pick up their kids safely, and the township participated in a safe signage program, the support of a new parking lot, as I'm sure you're aware, and that has greatly alleviated our safety concerns for our kids. So I think you can rest assured that a similar kind of thing would go on to ensure the safety at that Four Corners. And I think the precedent stands on its own.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone who attended tonight and listened and asked your questions, and also who sent in your concerns and questions. And for those of you who are on Zoom, because at a public meeting, this is the time to do it, and it's all recorded, and it helps the planners and it helps the developers. So just to thank you for participating. Now, our next item is our confirming bylaw, and I'll read the bylaw. Be it resolved that bylaw number 107-2022, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting of Tuesday, September 13th, 2022, be read and deemed to be passed this 13th day of September, 2022. Could I have a mover, please? Deputy Mayor Gibson, second. Counselor Booth, all in favor? Carried. And motion to adjourn. Be it resolved that the special council meeting be adjourned at 8:17 PM. Mover, Deputy Mayor Gibson, Counselor Philip, all in favor? Carried. Thanks, everyone. My shoe has caught in the wheel.